The maternity ward was unusually quiet that morning, wrapped in the soft rhythm of machines and the distant cries of newborns beginning their first conversations with the world. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, falling gently on the pale walls and the narrow bed where Alina lay exhausted but radiant, her newborn son sleeping beside her. What should have been the happiest day of her life had already begun to feel heavy, weighed down by tension she could no longer ignore. She sensed it before the door even opened. The sharp click of heels, the deliberate pause, the unmistakable presence of someone who had come not to celebrate, but to judge. Her mother-in-law, Tamara, entered without greeting. Her eyes swept the room with cold efficiency, lingering not on the baby, but on Alina herself. There was no warmth in her gaze, no curiosity, no tenderness. Instead, her lips tightened as if she had walked into a place she despised. The nurse quietly excused herself, sensing the storm gathering in the air. Tamara crossed her arms and exhaled sharply, as though patience was something she had already spent. "So," she said at last, her voice low but cutting, "this is where you've been hiding." Alina struggled to sit up, her body still aching, her emotions raw. She had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that the birth of her grandson might soften Tamara's heart. Instead, the words that followed shattered that illusion completely. Tamara accused her of trapping her son, of ruining his future, of bringing shame instead of joy. Each sentence landed like a slap. Then came the command, delivered without hesitation: Alina was to leave. She had no place in that family, no right to their name, and certainly no right to their support. "You should pack your things," Tamara said, glancing at the small bag by the chair. "As soon as they discharge you, don't come back. You're heading to the wrong station if you think you belong with us." The words echoed painfully in Alina's mind. Abandoned. That was what she felt in that moment, discarded at her most vulnerable, when she could barely stand, let alone defend herself. She looked down at her sleeping baby, fighting tears, trying to summon strength she didn't know she still had. Tamara turned toward the door, convinced she had delivered the final blow. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The door opened again, and this time the presence that entered the room changed everything. The air shifted, as if the walls themselves were listening. Tamara froze mid-step, her confidence draining from her face as recognition hit her. Standing in the doorway was an unexpected guest, someone she never imagined would witness this scene, let alone intervene. It was Alina's estranged father-in-law, a man Tamara had long believed would always stand silently behind her decisions. He stepped forward slowly, his expression unreadable, then looked from Alina to the baby, and finally to Tamara. Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made Tamara's hands tremble. "I heard everything," he said simply. In that instant, Tamara was speechless. The authority she wielded so effortlessly moments ago vanished. He approached the bed, smiled gently at Alina, and carefully touched the baby's tiny hand. Then he turned back to Tamara, his eyes sharp with disappointment. "You don't get to decide who belongs," he said. "Not today. Not ever." Tamara tried to respond, to regain control, but no words came. For the first time, she was confronted not with obedience, but with consequence. Elsewhere, on a brightly lit television set thousands of miles away, another confrontation was unfolding, equally intense but broadcast for the world to see. Janet Jackson sat at the table on The View, her posture composed but her eyes blazing with restrained emotion. The discussion had started as a conversation about art, legacy, and public responsibility, but it quickly turned personal. Sunny Hostin pressed her with pointed questions, implying contradictions, challenging her past decisions, and questioning her silence on certain social issues. At first, Janet answered calmly, choosing her words with care. She had spent decades under scrutiny and knew how easily a moment could be twisted. But the tone shifted. Sunny's questions grew sharper, her assumptions more direct. The studio audience sensed the tension, the subtle change in Janet's expression as patience gave way to frustration. "There's a difference between asking questions and passing judgment," Janet finally said, her voice steady but firm. "You don't live my life. You don't know the choices I've had to make." Sunny pushed back, insisting the public had a right to answers. That was the moment something snapped. Janet leaned back, shook her head slowly, and stood up. The room fell silent as she removed her microphone. "I came here for a conversation, not an interrogation," she said. And I won't sit here and be disrespected." Without another word, Janet Jackson walked off the set. Cameras followed her for a split second before cutting away, leaving the host stunned and viewers at home buzzing with shock. Social media erupted instantly, opinions clashing, clips replayed, every gesture analyzed. Some called it dramatic, others called it powerful, but no one could deny the raw authenticity of the moment. Back in the maternity ward, Alina watched as her father-in-law pulled up a chair and sat beside her, offering quiet reassurance. He promised support, protection, and a future she no longer had to face alone. Tamara stood near the door, silent and small, forced to confront the reality that her control had limits. Two different scenes, two different worlds, yet bound by the same truth. There comes a moment when silence ends, when power shifts, and when those who believed they could dominate others are left stunned. Whether in a hospital room or on a national television show, standing up against injustice carries a cost, but it also carries a profound sense of liberation. The smell of antiseptic hung in the air of the maternity ward, blending with the soft warmth of fresh linen and the quiet hum of hospital life. Outside the window, the city moved on as usual, unaware that inside this small room a woman's world was trembling on the edge of collapse. Alina lay propped against white pillows, her body weak but her heart fiercely alive, listening to the gentle breathing of her newborn daughter sleeping beside her. She had imagined this moment so differently: flowers, smiles, whispered congratulations. Instead, tension sat in the room like a shadow that refused to leave. When the door opened, Alina didn't need to look up to know who it was. Her mother-in-law, Tamara, entered with the same rigid posture and cold expression she had worn for years. There was no softness in her face, no sign that the miracle of birth had moved her. Her eyes skimmed past the baby as if the child were an inconvenience rather than a blessing. Tamara closed the door behind her and stood there, arms crossed, claiming the space as if it belonged to her. "So this is how it ends," Tamara said, her voice sharp and unwavering. "A child born into chaos." Alina's hands tightened around the edge of the blanket. She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Tamara didn't wait for a response. She launched into accusations that had clearly been rehearsed long before this moment, claims that Alina had ruined her son's life, that the marriage had been a mistake, that the baby was a burden rather than a joy. Each sentence struck deeper than the last, until finally Tamara delivered the blow she had come to deliver. "You will leave," she said flatly. "As soon as they discharge you, you're gone. Don't come to our home, don't expect help, and don't use our name. You're abandoned now, and if you think you belong with us, you're rushing to the wrong station." The words echoed cruelly in the sterile room. Alina felt the sting of humiliation burn behind her eyes. She looked down at her child, trying to memorize every detail, as if the world outside might try to take even this away from her. Tamara turned toward the door, satisfied, believing her authority absolute. But just as her hand touched the handle, the door opened from the other side. An unexpected guest stepped in, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Tamara's breath caught in her throat. Standing there was Victor, her husband's father, a man known for his quiet nature and long silences. He had rarely intervened in family conflicts, choosing peace over confrontation. Tamara had built her power on that silence, mistaking it for agreement. Victor looked around the room slowly, his gaze settling first on Alina, then on the sleeping baby. His expression softened, and for a moment he said nothing. The silence was heavier than any shout. Then he turned to Tamara. "I heard what you said," he spoke calmly, but his voice carried undeniable authority. "Every word." Tamara opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Victor stepped closer to the bed, placing a gentle hand on Alina's shoulder. "No woman who just gave birth is abandoned," he continued. "And no grandmother has the right to cast out a mother and child." For the first time, Tamara looked uncertain. The control she wielded so confidently began to crack. Victor straightened and faced her fully. "If anyone is going the wrong way," he said, "it's the one who confuses cruelty for strength." Tamara stood frozen, speechless, as Victor made it clear that Alina and the baby would have his full support, financial, emotional, and legal if necessary. The balance of power shifted in that single moment, leaving Tamara stripped of the authority she thought she owned. Far from the hushed corridors of the hospital, another confrontation was unfolding under bright studio lights, broadcast to millions. Janet Jackson sat on the set of The View, elegant and composed, her presence commanding attention even in stillness. The conversation had begun politely, touching on her legendary career, her influence on music and culture, and the challenges of living under constant public scrutiny. But the tone gradually shifted when Sunny Hostin leaned forward, her questions growing sharper, more personal. Sunny challenged Janet on her perceived silence during certain cultural moments, suggesting that with her platform came an obligation to speak more, to do more. Janet listened, her face calm but her eyes revealing strain. She responded carefully, explaining that activism can be private as well as public, that not every contribution is meant for applause. But Sunny pressed harder, her words implying avoidance rather than choice. The atmosphere in the studio tightened. Viewers could sense the shift, the moment when a line was crossed. Janet inhaled slowly, then spoke with a clarity that cut through the tension. "You don't get to define my voice for me," she said. "I've lived my truth in ways you may never see." Sunny countered, framing the issue as accountability. That was when Janet rose from her chair. The audience fell silent as she removed her microphone, her movements deliberate and calm. "This is no longer a conversation," she said firmly. "It's an accusation. And I won't stay where respect is missing." Janet Jackson walked off the set, leaving behind stunned hosts in a moment that would soon dominate headlines and social media feeds. Some praised her for asserting boundaries. Others criticized her for leaving. But the image of her standing up and walking away became a symbol of quiet defiance. Back in the maternity ward, Victor sat beside Alina, offering reassurance without grand speeches. He spoke of the future, of rebuilding trust, of protecting what truly mattered. Alina felt something shift inside her, not just relief, but strength. She was no longer alone, and she no longer had to accept cruelty as her fate. In both places, power changed hands. A mother-in-law lost her voice when confronted by truth. A global icon reclaimed hers by refusing disrespect. Different lives, different stages, but the same lesson echoed clearly: no one has the right to strip another of dignity. And when that dignity is defended, quietly or publicly, the impact can be impossible to ignore.